Welcome to another episode of Learn Buddhism. I'm Alan Peto. Today, we're talking about a topic that I think is of importance to a lot of people, and that's how to practice Buddhism virtually. You don't have a temple nearby and monastics. How do you practice Buddhism? I'm joined by my special guest, Venerable Chi. He has over 1 million followers on TikTok and social media on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and I thought he'd be great to talk to about this topic. So, Venerable, welcome.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for having me. We both have been on Instagram for quite a few minutes, and it's a joy and pleasure to be here and inspiring all of your listeners.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I wonder if you can go ahead and give everyone a little background on yourself, what form of Buddhism you practice, your practice in general, and essentially just, a little bit more about yourself so they can understand who you are if they're not already following you on social media.
Yes. So my name is Venerable Chi. I'm a Theravada Buddhist monk. I've been a monk going on 8 years now. I've been practicing and studying Buddhism over the past 21 years. Before becoming a monk, I was a legal and medical interpreter serving the judicial system at the 6th Judicial Court here in Pinellas County. I hit rock bottom in 2015, whereas my grandmother passed away, followed by my best friend, Jacob Hall. That led me towards a very suicidal path. I was going to be either in prison or dead. And I figured, since my grandmother inspired me onto the path of peace, that I should make this corrective changes in my life. And comes now, it's been working out. Everything that we're doing in Buddhism is working. And again, my job as a monk is to try to prove the Buddha wrong. And I haven't been able to find a teaching or practice that have not yielded results, yielded empirical, direct evidence, and I have, in fact, achieved peace by and through the samadhi and vipassana meditative practice and through the threefold training. Very blessed to have all of the teachers. I chose Theravada because it was straight to the point. It is the original source. However, I also give credit to the Mahayana world because my first training, especially death meditation, was from the Mahayana tradition by Venerable Tong in Nha Trang, Vietnam. It's Buddhism is beautiful, and I hope that everyone is inspired to go forth and study, very well, look into it, stay with it, persistence, discipline, and discipline equals destiny.
Absolutely. Very well said. How did your, first steps, or how did your interest in teaching virtually come about?
So the TikTok thing, everything was an experiment, was and still is an experiment with the online digital Sangha world. I guess there's a certain way that I put it out there where it inspired Gen Zoomers. Like all of you, I'm 35 years old. Ever since Facebook and MySpace, I kind of not want to get too much involved into it. Obviously, if a monk knows too much about social media, he's obviously too involved in that and not practicing underneath the tree. And so I blew up the way that maybe it's the personality, the quality of the teachings, the shorts. I don't know. But, comes now, you can see that how necessary it is post-COVID, the accumulated despair and depression and suicide rates. And that's how I got started, was, just picking up the TikTok and seeing if the algorithm was actually true and real, whether we're actually reeling in people to inspire them, to help them, awaken to what's going on in their life. And it's working out so far throughout all of the measurements of the social media, different types of platforms that is out there.
Absolutely. And I think you hit on an important topic, like the rates of suicide going up, depression and all these other issues, especially that was caused or during the pandemic, right? So in general, we've seen, for many years now, interest in Buddhism has been growing. And I think we saw, as we got kind of like into that Zoom era during the pandemic, we saw more teachers coming online, such as yourself. We saw, temples like, we have to go ahead, like my temple, they did a lot of things that were virtual. So why do you think this interest in Buddhism is growing? Even when they don't have a temple nearby, their first encounter might be yourself, might be, reading a book. Why do you think we're seeing this interest in Buddhism?
I think that people have been always struggling to make sense and meaning in their life, and the suffering, the magnitude and depth of one's suffering and trying to find a good working philosophy to identify with, what to expect. So, I was born and raised Catholic, and then I converted into Buddhism. And we look at some of these religions out there, it describes the what, but not the how. Venerable Jayasaro have asserted that Buddhism is the most effective and most comprehensive educational system the world has ever seen. And as you look through all of that, again, it is the listener's job to investigate and to prove me wrong and to prove all of the previous teachers before me wrong, if in fact Buddhism is the most effective and comprehensive educational system the world has ever seen. People are depressed and anxious because they do not see things as they are, right? They're not mindful of their mind, not mindful of their feelings, the aggregates and the foundations of mindfulness. So therefore, it leads to all sorts of psychological disorders and behaviors. And so therefore, the masses of suffering, when you see the Buddha, you're at peace. Just looking at the image of the Buddha alone, you're at peace. That reels people in. And they're like, wow, what is it about him where he just closes his eyes and it looks like he's really blissed out right now? I'm curious. So they're also looking for teachers, good, qualifying, authentic, good teachers to see if, who they can identify with, who is loving, caring, kind, compassionate, understanding, who is straightforward, who is strict. And they gravitate towards the choice of that particular teacher. And again, during my training and during my research, I conduct Buddhist psychotherapy often. And I was conducting research during COVID times and post-COVID times. So therefore, I was very involved in the digital world. So I was just like, okay, well, great. I'm already a monk, so I don't have to shelter in because I'm like a hermit here already. I just need to just, get these webcams up and going and the whole world can benefit from it. And that's what happened. But that's why people, suffering will never stop. We know that the existence of the first noble truth, old age, death, disease, decay. And people will always trying to have that question mark. Why do people die? Why am I subject to decay? Why is there suffering? Samsaric formations, samsaric cycles. And Buddhism have the answer for that. We tell you the how. We tell you the why and the how. And what you can do about it to improve your karmic debts, to mitigate your own pain and suffering. And can't we use more than that each and every single day to be more liberated, to have more freedom, to not be bonded and chained by life's expectations, cultural expectations, how you should behave, how you should live your life, the shoulds, right? Woulda, coulda, shoulds. And so my job is to teach the middle way. And I think throughout my journey, you all have seen most of my middle way. I don't really care what other people think about how I live my life. It is in accordance as much as possible to the Theravada tradition. And it is to exemplify and inspire the middle life of peace, happiness, but also, I play extreme sports and run and hike and all these things with my young Gen Z students, So again, the middle way and how to help people find that is key and cardinal in the forthcoming days.
No, I like that explanation. Also, like how you mentioned the Buddha. So, as you know, we're kind of in the samsaric, existence, this world. We're just clouded to the truth that Buddha taught. We're just, I kind of use a example of like a dirty window. You can't really see out of. You're seeing shadows. You're assuming what it is, and we're reacting upon that, right? And so, I think for us, just as ordinary sentient beings, we see someone like the Buddha or a statue of the Buddha, right, or a painting or whatever. And that inspires us. And that's probably what, brings a lot of us there. Like we see this is this perfected being and we want to get there as well. So we have, especially Westerners, they want to practice Buddhism. And, maybe you might be blessed to be inside a city that has many different types of Buddhist traditions, or you may be having none around you. So they're definitely looking at books, they're looking at podcasts, they're looking at videos and social media. What would your recommendations be on how they can practice Buddhism? And I'm going to use the word here, probably they're not going to use maybe, but authentically. So typically we're going to go to temple, we're going to do things like that, but you can't do that if you don't have one around you. What would be your, I would guess, your opinion and suggestions for them?
So the existence of YouTube, existence of Google, the power, the world is right in front of you, buying through your own phone. The phone has ever been the most powerful thing a person can possess at any given time. Obviously, with the power of research and Google, you need to Google the teacher and what is he all about? How does he teach? Do I identify with the three primary school of Buddhism? Do I like the teacher? Is he gonna pick up the phone? You just gotta ask these questions. And once you like the teacher, hopefully you grow to trust the teacher and trust the process to see how one teacher behaves and if it is in accordance to the Vinaya. Does he own three robes? Does he, do this, do that according to that particular tradition? And yeah, it is tough when you live in a city where you don't have access to a monastery, which could be quite warm and welcoming. But in the days of the Buddha, you got to remember, if we go back primitively, a lot of monasteries didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And wherever the Buddha went, you kind of travel with him on foot. And he said, sit, meditate. And you just sit and you meditate and you trusted the teacher and trusted the process. So that's always been my thing, is to trust the teacher and trust the process, and to, again, come and see for yourself. And when the teacher's online, again, pretend like the teacher is right in front of you, right there with you. For myself, I've made myself available to the public. And I've also have open invitations to anyone that can come here in Pinellas Park to see me, to confront in my presence about what's been going on in life, if they want to engage into Buddhist psychotherapy, or if traditional therapy have failed, if they wanted to try something more welcoming and non-judgmental, no diagnosis. So, again, it is dependent upon, and it depends on the level of understanding of the student, the level of spiritual growth, where they're at, whether they're ripened, not ready or not ready. We just don't know. My hope is to make myself available and then meet the student where they're at. And a skillful teacher is trained by and through the methods to see where they're at in life, to meet them where they are with open arms. But at the same time, with open arms, welcoming, but also know how to adjust and calibrate the level of discipline necessary to retain them and to keep them straight on the path, and to emphasize clearly, this is your suffering. Even if I was a Buddha, I cannot save you. No one can and no one may, said the Buddha. So even if I was a fully enlightened arahant, I still can't save you guys. And one who says he's an arahant obviously is not an arahant.
Right.
So it takes a lot of reflections. I believe, Buddhism, give Buddhism a try, and you have to exhaust all options. And if all you have left is the digital world, have at it. Study, dig into it with curiosity. Like all of us monks, sometimes we're stuck at a monastery and all we have is books. A house without books is a house without windows. But all of you have books. All of you can get access to Amazon and thriftbooks.com and the internet and Google. And when you're bored, don't sit there and slide up and down TikTok and look at people, dancing and shaking and all this other stuff. Go to accesstoinsight.org, go and look at, Empty Cloud Monastery, Yutatamu Bhikkhu, Jayasaro, Ajahn Sarana, and just feed yourself with good stuff. There's 84,000 teachings. You better try to grasp as much of that as you possibly can in this short, brief life.
Yeah, I really like that explanation. You're exactly right. The Buddha said this is a rare existence. It's a privileged existence, really, to be a human in this realm. And we can hear the Dhamma, and we can practice it. And that's not something we can have elsewhere. And so you're absolutely right. It's that that dedication, that effort. You can't help us beyond what we were able to help ourselves with. So we're not going to go down that path. Also, you can't force us, so you can guide us, as a monastic, but it's up to us. And that kind of goes into my next question for you. So traditional Buddhism, what we're going to see around the world is where we have, the triple gem, or the three jewels. And we got the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And so when we're talking virtually, well, okay, the Sangha, got my temple, I can go there, I can absolutely see my monastics, I got the teachers there, right? But virtually, I may have, the Buddha as our teacher, the Dhamma as the teachings, right? What about the Sangha? And you see a lot where Sanghas sometimes use interconnectedly as like, well, it's just, going to be this broader group of, practitioners, which I can see, but also traditionally it's the monastic community and the lay followers that are part of it. So kind of what's your opinion? And this is really, I think, more from my understanding as well, and your opinion of it. How can, those who are Buddhists who don't have a temple nearby, how did they get that Sangha component of the Triple Gem Three Jewels?
Community and connection to other people is important because it reminds you, you find inspiration and motivation through watching other people meditate, through watching people's unshakable faith and conviction towards the Triple Gem altogether, the totality of the experience. And it is tough. I mean, COVID did a number on us, and monasteries also struggle to keep the lights on because of the economic crisis right now and at the time of this talk. What is important to remember is that the Buddha said that, learn to walk alone because not everyone lasts forever. And I'd rather walk alone than to walk with fools. And when there is no monastery present, then you focus on you, because when the time is right, things will open up. The causes and conditions will open up. Have faith in that, believe in that, rather than, oh, well, this sucks. I can only study online and there's no one around and stuff like that. You have to, then you learn the art of discipline. Then you need to look at the 5 hindrances. You need to start looking at the checklist. Buddhism gave you a very long checklist. 7 factors of enlightenment, hindrances, meditation on the Four Noble Truths. Over and over again, you have to try to remember these things. Over and over again, look at definitions of dukkha, tanha, lobha, dosa, moha, and greed, anger, delusion. You got to look at all of this and try to perfect each one slowly and thoroughly, like you do in the dishes. If there's a ugly steak stain on there that's been there for a week, you're going to have to scrub a little harder and a little longer, and not to half beep the dishes.
It's not instant results.
Right, it's not instant result, right? So so you look at you have plenty to do. You don't sit there and say, I'm bored and I have no sangha, and create excuses for yourself. I went through it. There was times in my life where I was not with the sangha and taking solitary practice, and I did a silent retreat for 1 complete year up in Gainesville, Florida. Like, I uttered probably 2 sentences, maybe a paragraph the whole year to humans. Literally, I mean, talk about solitary. And so if I can do it, you can do it. Except we're in the West, we've gotten used to a lot of excuses, and I want me, mine, I, right? Anatalakana, me, mine, I, and all that causes suffering and delay time to study what needs to be known. I mean, look at some of these priests, not even Buddhists, but look at the Catholic priests who are in their living quarters, all of the previous saints, or previous canonized people, venerables in the Catholic world, who you look at their living quarters and you're like, wow. And all they had was one Bible to sit there, pray and meditate. Blessed are those who meditate on the laws of God. And then they do what needs to be done, and they came out just fine. Well, why can't you sit there for a couple of weeks and months until things fall into place, save up money, and actually travel and see the world and create the causes and conditions to see a sangha, to be with a sangha? So, I mean, there's challenges, I agree. But you also know how to create, you need to know how to create your own heaven and create the sangha in your mind and do what needs to be done so that you're prepared to engage in with the sangha. There's many people who don't do their homework and walk into the sangha and end up, acting a fool. So they just compound the pain and sorrow and misery in a place of peace, tranquility, and serenity. So therefore, they're coming in because they're not happy with life and not happy with themselves. And some don't do their homework, so they bring all sorts of personalities and anger and stuff like that really disrupts the peace and the zen that is in there. So my best suggestion and advice for all of you is, again, to be creative in your mind. And if you don't know how to, well, reach out to Alan or reach out to me, reach out to other monks and ask what are your recommendations or in my particular situation and where I live. And sometimes you could live in a place where it's really cold, really hot, and the weather could dictate your mood and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Good suggestions and good feedback on that. And I picked up on one part of what you said as well about, the temples that are pandemic, try to keep the lights on, right? When you go to temple, there's usually donations there and everything you're doing. So they weren't having that when they were closed. And I think a lot of times when people are, virtual Buddhism, right? Like, well, it's free. Buddhism is all free. Well, it takes, yes, monks are, getting a paycheck, but someone's got to keep the lights on. Got to keep, over their heads and everything else, right? So, charity, generosity, that's really compassion is, really important inside Buddhism. And we show that as laypersons by supporting the Sangha, monastics, and that's something I hope we could see I would say a growth or more adoption of with Westerners practicing Buddhism. We got to support monastics in the temple as well. This is a key part. So you have a large social media presence. Like you mentioned, it was an experiment, they picked up on you, right? They like the way you teach. And I kind of look at that, I'm in Mahayana, of course, and, it's skillful means, right? And I see how you teach and you're making sure you're explaining the Buddhist teachings in a way that can be understood by people in where they're at. And I think that's really key. What has been I will say your largest or number one, I don't want to say feedback, but essentially, what have you gained from virtual Buddhism? Like, what have you really determined in this experiment so far? Is it good, bad? Have you picked up on something you think is really important? Your takeaway.
Yeah, it reaches the typologies of students, young students, old students, people who are dealing with life. The application of social media seeps into their life when they need it the most. Breakups, financial instability, suicidal, homicidal ideations. When they turn on their phone and ta-da, here we are telling them, don't do it. Give the gift of safety. If you take your life and you get suicidal, you're going to take rebirth and it's not going to be well next life. I'm telling you. And it makes them rethink things. Sometimes we can, intervene without even knowing the clinical benefits when people are going through things in life. I don't know how long it would take you, Alan, to go through my phone of messages of people thanking me that you saved my life. This has impacted me in some way, shape, or form. Like the amount of messages here constitutes a book of maybe 500 page of just messages alone, positive messages alone. And don't worry, I mean, no one exempt praise or blame, said the Buddha. So I get both praise and blame on there all day from the secular world. And, so it really helps inspire people. That's all we can do, is do the best that we can and put it all out there. It's kind of like a radio, you just broadcast, and whoever catches it, catches it. We can't save all. And when a monk do what needs to be done, practice what needs to be practiced, then, we've done our part. What more can we do? I can't save everybody. Don't have the resources to. And blessed are those who heed the advice of the wise. Blessed are those who see the depth, the profound, the jewel in the teachings. Blessed are those who reflect on the teachings and what it means to them in their life. And then if they get curious after a couple of words being uttered, then they dive into it. And, and blessed are those who became enlightened after one sentence, like in the text said, even a novice monk can utter a couple of words and you can become a fully enlightened arahant, based on a couple of sentences being uttered by a monk. I know that I was quite awakened, not like, not sainthood awakened, but quite humanly, academically enlightened when my cousin said, be mindful of your thoughts. At like 16 years old, I was like, oh my God, Andy, what did you say? And that sat with me the whole year, one sentence. So obviously he was more enlightened, not in a sense of sainthood, but very academically and spiritually enlightened in his own right, to inspire me with just one sentence. So, just hopefully everyone, and then you're playing a role in it. Everyone's playing a role in it. Social media also serve as a measurement, a social measuring tool for us to see what sticks out and what don't. Like, Valentine's, do some teachings on love and forgiving and letting go and attachment. love without attachment. So you do stuff like that, and obviously I've tried to do some political views on hot topics like abortion. That did not age well, so it serves as a measuring tool for me in the social psychology experiment area, to not to jump into hot topics like that, socially charged topics like that. So, I'm a young monk, I'm learning, and I'm recording all of this. And again, when I have time, I will gather all of the data and intel that I have collected over the past 5 years of online presence and 8 total years, and then present it in a book. So you all can look forward to that.
Oh, that'll be interesting. Yeah. Because you're right. This is a experiment. If you really think about it, especially the pandemic, I think pushed a lot of that into the forefront, where, especially, we'll just quote unquote traditional Buddhism. Well, come to temple, right? Here's like, we got to do something, right? And I think that kind of goes to my last question for you. So we've seen where we've had some temples and we have some monastics that have come virtually, right? For that period of time, but we kind of see a little bit of regression in some ways to like, okay, we're going to end this now, come back to temple or something. Would there be any suggestions you would have, or maybe opinions you would have for, I would say, the broader, Buddhist community, especially with temples and monastics, regarding virtual? Should they continue to do it? What is your suggestion for them on how to do that successfully? Just something brief or something that sticks out in your head.
What they should in regards to keep on doing what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, or maybe like a monastic who wants to dip their toes into doing things virtually like you did. Lessons learned, basically.
Yeah, you have to exercise more discipline and pretend like I still follow the path as if Ajahn Chah is still sitting here next to me. I mean, I'm exemplifying my life as if they're literally sitting right here. Like everything I say has to be true and correct and beneficial and all of that. And all the teachers and arahants are looking at me. And so it's just, so live your life as if I'm there with you. Live your life as if, the Buddha's there watching you. I mean, the Buddha would obviously want you to get off the couch and get out of bed, do what needs to be done quickly, stay enthusiastic, look at the hindrances, don't be lazy, and don't let, your mind play all sorts of tricks and games on you. And so you have to exercise supreme discipline when you are by yourself. And again, that's why I have students check in with me once a week so that I can measure their progress. And I have them keep a journal so that they can write down what they got out of the readings, what it meant for them, and how they apply it to their life. Also to measure self-care. Are you eating, sleeping okay? Anything of concerns. So it holds them accountable that they have to answer to me. And that way, they're answering to themselves, actually. Even if they don't do what I suggest, and I'll be like, well, tighten up. If you don't, you're gonna have health problems, or you're gonna compound your suffering. I'm not there. I can't be there. This is the best I can do, is to encourage you and tell you what needs to be done. So the intelligent student, the thoughtful student, would have enough respect to do that, to make adjustment and recalibrate as necessary for their own sake, peace of mind. One has to take suffering seriously. One has to understand suffering, what constitutes suffering, and so on. If you take it as a joke, down in life, it's going to be very costly with rehab and mental hospitals and ER bills and psychiatric bills. So I take my peace very seriously. You have to look at the circle of your life, the details of your life, time management. And again, this is the best time in your life right now to study Dhamma, because you have all the resources at the convenience of your home, the freedom and convenience. But take into caution about the freedom thing, right? It's that know how to channel your time wisely and to practice what needs to be done and exemplify generosity and dana. Like the great big test, for example, the analogy in Christianity, the great big test is God tells you to never tired of forgiving and never tired of asking for forgiveness. So if your neighbor done did something, you forgive them. And if I show up all of a sudden and I ask you that, will you and are you? And if you said no, well, obviously you're not doing what God's telling you to do. In Buddhism, one of the hardest thing ever to do is to give more and take less, right?
Hmm.
You have nothing to give, and dedicate your body, speech, and mind for the benefit of others. How many doors have you held for people? How many compliments have you given? How many smiles and all of that? That's the hardest thing to do in a day. That's why we don't see people doing it. You walk outside, go to Publix, look at Walmart. Look at, no one's smiling. No one's doing nice and kind things. They're complaining about how long the line is. So where do you come in as the Buddhist that you are? That the Buddhist, the heart of a Buddha, to exemplify kindness, to inspire other people. And then you do nice things and they're going to see that. They're going to do nice things. And it just goes down the line throughout the whole day, the domino effect. So this is the best time of your life to heed the advice of the wise. Look at the Dhammapada. Look at the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path. Alan's here to help. I'm here to help. Every other monastics, is here to help. And we change by and through our own practice. We change by and through our own studies and practice. So therefore, you can change after today. If life was not well, you can change after today. And after this talk, you can change just like that, and stop the cycle of suffering. And, looking at the depression and addressing all of the clinical issues, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and face the pain. The Buddha wants you to face the pain, face the problem, have the courage to do so. And everyone who is listening, they have the courage. They're ready. They're ripened. Let's do it. Just get it
Right.
done. Be like Nike. Let's do it.
Exactly. Venerable, I was going to ask you for some like parting last words. I kind of like what you said right there, and I think that's perfect. I'm going to be putting inside the description for the podcast, like all your social media, so they can connect with you that way. But I want to ask you like one final question, or if you have any other parting thoughts. But do you have any projects going on, or anything that you want to share with the community listening?
Yeah, so I do free Buddhist counseling, education, and meditation here locally. And I counsel people from all over the world every night, 8 p.m. Florida time, same time as New York, for free. We depend on donation to survive. And at this time, and at the time of this talk, there's the t-shirt program that helped to raise awareness in Buddhism. It has my logo. It says, help create a new world. And it has my name, it has my phone number and my social media on. It's a really nice shirt that spreads the message of Buddhism, raising awareness. You wear the shirt and people are like, what? Free what? Everyone loves free stuff, right? They're like,
Right.
free Buddhist education, meditation, and counseling. What? I need to get my daughter, I need to get my sister, I need to get my friend, neighbor, and so on. And it contributes towards life-saving programs here, the cognitive behavioral therapy program for students who are at very high risk of suicide, and to increase student resiliency. A fourth student died yesterday as I met with the mom, and Isaiah Castellano passed away yesterday due to a tragic accident here in Clearwater. And when we trace back the links of influence, Paticca Samuppada, his life was not going well. He was unhappy about the breakup and just communication and family dynamic and systems. So we want to be able to reach out as much as we can. We can't save them all, but all of us here who are listening should try to do the best we can, in this one world that we have, with the time that we have left, to make an impact and to feel good about it. And when you contribute to local monasteries or any monasteries or my cause, it doesn't have to be my cause, St. Jude Cancer Foundation, you rejoice in that memory when you get older. When you live a good life, you can relive it again when you're older, said the Dalai Lama. And, I rejoice many times in my life. I've been at the mercy of karma. Life of an interpreter is you never know when you have cases. How many people are going to get in trouble with the law? How many people are going to be sick and dying for them to utilize me as the interpreter? So therefore, I've been fortunate for the past, 15 years doing that, and surviving and using the extra funding to fund my own project. I'm like my biggest fan. It's like, even when donations go down, and many times I needed to suspend or wanting to suspend or terminate certain programs, I'm like, keep going. You know what? The light and hope in the world, everyone is a light and hope in the world that we all can use more and more each day. But by and through talks like this, you help to raise awareness about life-saving programs, the Sangha, the power of the Sangha, and the triple gem all together, so that everyone come together and all the Buddhists be kind to each other, live in harmony, practice meditation, and subsequently become fully enlightened beings when we pass away. That is my hope, and that's part of creating a new world, is that, you know what, if you didn't fit in this world, if they were not kind to you, if problems found you, or if you've created problems for yourself, and because you didn't know the how, now we're teaching the how effectively, efficiently, quickly, so that you can enter the streams of enlightenment, one of the four stages. And I take that very seriously. I don't want to come back in this world. And I teach all my students, I'm like, well, you know what? Let's go to the Cool Kids Club. Let's meditate together. Let's do it now.
Right. No, wonderful. I really like that. Venerable, thank you again for being part of this episode. I wish you well. I want to see you get a couple more million on your social media and spread those teachings. And for everybody else, thank you for listening, and I'll talk with you in our next episode. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My blessings for all of you. May you all be well, be happy, be free, and be free from mental suffering and be free from physical suffering. Thank you, Alan, and my blessing goes to you also. Take care.
Thank you, Venerable.